Hi, boys and girls. I don't know what happened at the end of my last video, but the last page was not recorded. So I'm going to do the last page of chapter 6 and then chapter 7 for you. So when I was reading last, Father had a solution on how to get Crusoe down to the lock, and it was the icy road. So here's a nice illustration of that. Their progress was now 10 times as fast. Slipping, sliding, slithering, and skidding, the water horse glided down the icy road with no effort on his own, just very little on Father's, and in a half hour they had reached the lock, which was a quarter-mile away. Then it was easy. The edge of the lock was close to the road and a little bit below it. With one last shove, they launched Crusoe into his new home. It was easy to see his delight at being back in his element again, and he found so much space to swim there. Away he went, head and neck showing above the surface like a periscope. A V-shaped wake streamed out behind him until he reached the middle of the lock. Then he turned, and for a moment he looked back at them standing on the shore. Then he slid silently beneath the surface and was lost to their sight. So that's the end of chapter 6. I'm a little sad that he's gone in the lock, but I'm happy for him too. How are you feeling about it? Chapter 7 is called A Bit Too Tame. You see the problem, don't you? Said Father the following morning. I do, said Grumble. He's a bit too tame. They watched the children standing in the shallows playing with Crusoe. Each one had a stick and they would scratch his back. And as usual, he was squirming with pleasure at the rough tickling. There had been no sign of him when they arrived. The surface of the lock was calm and empty, but Christy had simply called, Crusoe! And almost at once he had surfaced and came swimming toward them. He's not afraid of humans. He's too tame. That's the trouble. Kind treatment and good food. That's what people mean to him. So we think he'll react the same way to anybody. I'm thinking of the locals, the tourists, anybody. Suppose a couple of your school friends were to come visit you and Crusoe spotted them. He might come close for a tickle, mistaking them for you. You haven't told any of your friends about him yet, have you? Of course not, said Kirsty, shocked. I did not. They wouldn't believe me even if I tried to tell them, said Angus. Anyway, said Grumble, there's not many folks that come out this way. It only needs to be one person, though, said Father, and that will give it away. Then we'll have dozens of newspaper reporters writing about him, taking photographs of him, and then the world and his whole life will want to come and gawk at him. Next thing, they'll want to catch him and put him in a zoo. That's if some sportsman doesn't shoot him first to mount his head onto a trophy. The lock's so small, said Grumble, especially at the rate he's growing. Now, if only we could put him in a really huge stretch of water, a much larger lock, maybe Loch Lomond. That would be a good spot for him. Said Father. In my opinion, the first thing to do is to teach him a new trick. Right now, his trick is he comes when he's called. We must train him to stay hidden unless he's called. How on earth are we going to do that? It won't be easy. It means disciplining the animal. He had things too easy, that's the trouble. Oh, the children are awfully fond of Beastie, said Grumble. They get a lot of pleasure from him. You've got a soft spot for him yourself, Father said to Grumble. And he shot a glance at his father-in-law's face, which wore an accustomed smile as he watched his grandchildren play with the water horse, instead of his usual frown. If you don't mind me saying so, Father went on, you're a happier man than you used to be. Grumble. Anyway, if we're to keep this strange pet, and that means keeping him a secret, then he's going to have to learn the hard way that we must show himself only when we want him to, only when we summon him. So that evening, as they all sat around a good fire of driftwood, for it was still quite cold outside, Father explained things to the children. So you see, this is what we must do unless we want to risk losing Crusoe. If we call him by name and he comes, that's fine. We can pat him, praise him, tickle him, offer him tidbits, make a thorough fuss of him. But what we must also do many times during the next few weeks, you see, Father had a whole month of leave while his ship was refitted. We must go and stand by the lock and not call him and not say anything. He'll see us and he'll come towards us, but we must ignore him, not touch him. Don't give him anything. Only speak sharply, angrily, like you would to a dog that has done something very naughty. "Oh, but Father," said Kirsty, "Crusoe's feelings would be terribly hurt." "They will, but he'll learn. He must learn. We must teach him, and we can't start too soon. His first lesson will be tomorrow morning." Now, it's morning. The previous day had been a memorable one for Crusoe. He emerged from the goldfish pond. He progressed painfully towards the road. Then it was the strange dizzy sensation of sliding down that hill, and then the glorious feeling of finding himself free in a watery home hundreds of times bigger than the old one. He had swum out through the still dark waters effortlessly. He turned to see the 4 giants watching him and waving at him. He had dived down into the depths, and what do you think he found? Fish, lots and lots of fish. Thousands, thousands. Crusoe didn't know a pike from a perch, from a salmon, from a trout. All he knew was that the loch was alive with food that now he found easily, very easy, and he could catch it quickly and swiftly. By nightfall, he had gorged himself and tired himself out in the bargain. And with the simplicity that marked all his actions, he closed his eyes and went to sleep. As always, he rose automatically in the midst of his slumbers to refill his lungs with air. And as automatically, he sank back down again, not 6 feet, but 60 feet. The next morning, after he had breakfast, he was swimming idly along in what he had known to be natural, instinctive manner of his race when not hunting. That is to say, he was completely submerged and thus invisible to an onlooker, except for his 2 nostrils, which were just above the surface of the water. Then he heard the call that he knew was his name. He swam rapidly to shore, and what a joy it was to be tickled by the 2 smallest giants. He still thought of them that way, even though he was now far bigger than any of them. And he wriggled with pleasure. They did not feed him this time, and he was full but extremely happy. But on the following day, things were different. He must have been underwater when the giants arrived, for he did not know they were there until suddenly he caught sight of 4 of them, standing silently on the shore. No call came from them, but Crusoe was delighted to see them, so he swam straight towards them, sloshed his way up into the shallows, and he stared up at them, waiting for a tickle. But no tickle came. No tickle was forthcoming. None of the usual affectionate sounds. Instead, they made angry sounds and pointed to the middle of the loch and shooed him away as if they wanted nothing more to do with him. And then they turned and they left. They didn't even look back. He was puzzled. He was hurt. The water horse stared after the departing giants. What had he done wrong? He bowed his head and gave a low moan of distress. Crusoe was sad. But he's learning an important lesson. He's learning when to come to shore and when not to come to shore. I'll read chapter 8 to you later. It's called First Birthday. Good night.